Okay. Tonight, we are continuing with our series about light. And this is the third in the series. There probably will be at least one more, and maybe that might be it. So tonight, we're going to start with the concept of light and vessels. Up to now, we dedicated the first one to, it was during Hanukkah. So we dealt with the light of creation, the light of the menorah, and the light of the Chanukiah. Last week, we dedicated the whole class to learning about the connection between darkness and light, as it's manifest in many, many different places in the Torah. And tonight, we're going to start with light and vessels. And depending on how much time we have, we're going to continue to different manifestations of light in practical reality. So we start with the idea that a very incredible idea in the Zohar that says that all vessels are thickened light. In other words, basically what it's saying is everything is emanating from the light of God. Everything is the light of God. But vessels, physicality, the material world is thickened light. Now this goes very, very well with modern science, which the huge, huge revelation that matter is energy. It's very similar to saying that all matter is thickened light, because energy is ultimately coming from the light of God. It's manifest on a physical level as energy, but it's coming from the light of God. So that's how we want to start, is that in the highest level, there is no distinguishing between light and vessel. Just like we learned that on the first day of creation, before God separated the light from the darkness, it was intermingled. In other words, they were in essence one. Light and darkness were one, and then they were separated. So this is on the highest primordial level. The idea of light and vessels is the idea that all matter, all vessels are thickened light. So first of all, let's just try to understand that, first of all, in Kabbalah and Chassidut, especially Chassidut, this concept of light and vessel is used all over the place. It's one of the most employed concepts in all of Chassidut and Kabbalah as well. So what do we mean exactly by light here? So there are many different ways that we can talk about light from a Kabbalistic, Hasidic idea, perspective. So when we look at light, really what we're talking about is an influx of godly energy. That this energy is recreating the world at every moment. And we say it every morning in our davening. God is renewing the works of creation at every split second. So this influx of energy, of light, of influence, of giving, revelation, spirit, and love, God's love. So we say, Chesed Kel Kol Hayom. the loving kindness of God is all the day. Hodu Lashem ki tov ki leolam chazdo. Give praise to Hashem because his kindnesses are forever. So these kindnesses is what animates the world, what keeps the world going. There's a constant influx of, again, light, energy, revelation, spirit, giving, influence. All of that is under the, call it the language of light. It's a language of giving. And so what is a vessel? A vessel is a recipient of the light. And so in relationship to God, the entire creation is a vessel. And that's why the first letter of the Torah, a bet, we've discussed this many times, is because of it's the number 2. So it represents duality, opposites, the polar reality of this world, from the physical to the spiritual. But the letter bet also means by it. And so the first letter in the Torah is telling us that all of creation is, as it were, God's house. It's the vessel that God can then shine his light, can give, can recreate on a constant basis. So Rabbi Simon Jacobson, so when he's talking about light and vessel, so he had other names for it. But again, when we're talking about light and vessel in this world, we are talking in a sense about opposites or a bipolar kind of perspective on the world. But on the highest level, like a triangle, in this world you have light and vessel, but in their primordial source, they're one. They come from the same energy. And that's why when we talk about the 4 Kabbalistic worlds, we're told that the higher up you go in the let's say the ladder of the worlds, the more light and vessel are one. And that's why they say in Atsilut, the world of emanation, there is no differentiation between light and vessel. The light is the vessel is the light. It's all one. It's only as we enter into materialism that we start to get a division between light and vessel. So Rabbi Simon Jacobson uses some of these other terms, what he calls like binary terms for viewing the relationship between light and vessel. So he says we can relate to it as purpose and structure. In other words, the purpose is the influx of light, and the structure is what holds it and allows the light to manifest itself. Function and form. Again, the vessel is the form that will make able a function to be able to manifest itself. Energy and expression. So, like for example, we're told that in the human psyche, that the soul has 3 garments. In other words, the soul is like the light. The body is the vessel. And this is like God is the light and the world is the vessel. And so in this way of thinking, the garment, this is just a different name for a vessel, is thought, speech, and action. In other words, the soul is full of light. But if there's no vessel, if there's no expression, if there's no form, if there's no structure, then light cannot express itself. And so we see that it's not just that a vessel receives light. It's much more than this. The vessel allows the light to manifest itself. Because if there's no vessel, there, in a sense, there's no way for the light to manifest itself, to express itself. It's like, let's say you have water, and you want some of this water. So you take a cup, or you take a bucket or a pail, and you have a vessel to fill the water. But what happens if you don't have a vessel? Then you would stand on the side of the stream or the river, and you can't really use it. You can't drink it, you can't wash with it, you can't plant with it. It's there, but nothing can happen. So when we say that the vessel receives, again, we're adding, it's not just receiving, it's allowing the light to manifest itself. He gives two other ideas, the product and the package. Now, let's say the product is a thought. A person wants to create something, wants to form something. But if there's no package to put it in, it's the same thing like the river running. It's a great idea. You have all the parts, but unless you can put them together in a form, a structure called a machine, or however we want to say it, it won't happen. Also, here he says a message and the media conveying it. So again, you have a message that you want to give to the world. So if you don't write it down as a book, or you don't get on Zoom and give it over to all of you nice people, then it's still up here. It's not manifest. No one hears it. No one reads it. No one sees it. Someone has the greatest class in the world, but if he doesn't show up at the lecture, then nothing happens. Okay, so this is just to try to make a foundation of the idea of light and vessel and the way it's used in Kabbalah, in Chassidut. So we've talked many times about the idea of the world of Tohu, and this world, the world of Tikkun. It's a big idea throughout Kabbalah and Chassidut that the previous world had what's called the Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. What happened? The light was so pure, so divine, the initial vessels, and here we're in Kabbalistic terms, we're talking about the Sfirot. There was no inter-inclusion between the Sfirot. Each Sfira said, Ani Amloch, I can rule all by myself. I don't need any of the other Sfirot. I can handle it myself. And we're told each Sfira, one by one, they broke because they didn't have the vessel for the light. So in the world of Tohu, the lights are tremendous and the vessels are very limited. This world is called Olam Tikkun, and it's a very material world. So there are lots of vessels, and very little light. So it's like Olam Tohu in reverse. So one of the most important teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe And he gave this over in a very dramatic way in Chabad circles, the 28th of Nisan. This is shortly before the Rabbi became sick at the end of his life. He basically publicly said, I've done everything I can do to bring the Mashiach. Now it's in your hands. And of course, for the people who were there, and then when word got out, this was like a milestone in Chabad. The Rebbe was kind of preparing that he had done everything he could, and the rest was in the hands of his students, his followers. And in the midst of the Verbringen, he gave not just a hint, but he said very clearly what was needed to bring the Mashiach. And he said that what had to happen was orot de tohu bekelim de tikkun, that the lights of tohu, meaning these phenomenally pure, strong, godly lights of the world of tohu, needed to be manifest in this world, but in vessels of rectified vessels. In other words, in a sense, when the vessels are strong enough for this light, then we're talking about a reunification of light and vessel. Because this world is a very, very dualistic world. That's just the reality, even in science and physics, in biology. Everything works on equal and opposite energies. But ultimately, there is a unity that brings them all together. So let's now concentrate a bit on, so what do we do with these teachings? How are they manifest in a Jewish lifestyle? And this is where mitzvot come in. Is, first of all, the numerical value of the plural for light, orot, lights. Orot equals, in Gematria, 613, the amount of mitzvot in the Torah. Orot equals 613. In tradition, there's this idea of 620, what are called amudei, or pillars of light. These pillars are the 613 mitzvot, and there's two versions. The first version is the 7 mitzvot that are rabbinic, but they have the, let's say, the power, the legitimacy of a biblical commandment. And 6 of these have the bracha that goes with them, where we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, that you made us holy in his mitzvot, and you commanded us. Well, these mitzvot from the rabbis were not commanded in the Torah, but the fact that we say this bracha means they have the same power as a biblical mitzvah. And let's see if I can go through them very quickly. It's al natila yadayim. Every time we wash our hands for bread, we say it as if it's commanded in the Torah, but the rabbis added it, but it has the legitimacy as a Torah mitzvah. So it's natila yadayim, halal, saying Hallel. Hallel is not in the Torah, but we say a bracha before it as if God had commanded us to do it, which he did through the rabbis. Lighting Hanukkah candles, reading the Megillah, and all of these have the bracha before it. An eruv, making an eruv. Shabbat candles, that's 6. And the 7th one are blessings in general. This doesn't have Asher Kiddushanu, but that's the 7th one. I'm saying all of this because when you add 613 with 7, it equals 620, and 620 equals Keter. It's the crown. And so this crown is sometimes called 620 pillars of light. So the mitzvot are called pillars of light. But the interesting thing is that there's really a light and vessel to every mitzvah. The vessel is the actual fulfillment or enactment of the mitzvah. And except for really a couple handfuls or less of mitzvah, all the mitzvah have to do with a physical object, a physical action, or speech. And each one of these, like I said, are levushim, thought, speech, and action. So we do a mitzvah. By doing the mitzvah, we create a vessel. But then it's in our reshut, it's in our choice how we're going to fill that mitzvah. In other words, someone can do a mitzvah in such a routine and rote manner that really what you have is the vessel. Now, the vessel is important. In of itself, just doing a mitzvah is very important. But then the question is, what do we fill it with? So therefore, we have a term that it's usually said about prayer, but we could say it the same thing about any mitzvah. And the phrase is tefillah b'li kavanah keguf b'li neshama. A prayer with no intent, meaning we're just saying the words and our mind is a million miles away. It's just that we know the prayers by heart. And it's not even, we're doing it on purpose, but unless we have focused thought, which is what kavana is, then what we have is a shell. So that phrase is a prayer without intent is like a body with no soul. So this could be said the same thing about any mitzvah. A mitzvah without kavanah is like a body without a soul. Now here, the intent is the light. That's what we're filling the package. The mitzvah is like the package. We just lit Hanukkah candles. So we light the candles, and it has value in of itself, because this is a very material word. So just doing the mitzvah and being aware that we're doing the mitzvah, let's say we have no higher thoughts whatsoever, no spiritual kavanas, no deep ideas, but we know that we're doing the mitzvah. So knowing that we're doing the mitzvah is already the light. We already know that we're doing the mitzvah, and that fills the physical action or the speech with content. But how much more so when, as we're doing a mitzvah, we have spiritual thoughts. We have godly thoughts. So that is the light that will fill up the vessel. Now, in a certain way, when a person can train themselves, it's like the light and the vessel become one. And ultimately, that is the goal. It becomes so natural not to do a mitzvah by rote or routine. It becomes natural that every mitzvah that a person does brings with it deep thoughts, deep concepts, deep focused intent. And then the light and the vessel, in a sense, become one, because here, going back to the gematria of orot, of lights, is 613 mitzvah. So in that sense, there is no division between the light and the vessel. That's the goal. The goal is that there shouldn't be a disconnect, and that a person is doing a mitzvah with like a blank, like just going through the motions. So this brings us to a famous saying of the Maggid of Mezrich, because we tend to think of, when we talk about the different worlds, Kabbalistic worlds, and there is a truth to this. There is a structure. There's a higher and a lower. There's a more spiritual and there's a more material. There's like a ladder. But the Maggid of Mezrich said the world of Atsilut is here. It's not like there's like this iron mechitza between each world. There's an inter-inclusion. And in fact, that's why it's given over in Chassidut, that this world, despite the fact that it's the lowest of all the worlds, the Alter Rebbe said this world is the lowest of all, the lowest of the low. But it has one advantage. Because it's the lowest of the low, it's the vessel for everything that comes above it. So that makes this world very, very unique. So when the Maggid said the world of Atsilut, the world of emanation, which usually we think of way up here, and like we said before, it's given over in the world of Atsilut, there is no differentiation between light and vessel. So when the Maggid said Atsilut is here, it means that there is a possibility, there is the ability to unify light and vessel to the point that they become one. And this is one of the greatest secrets. When Rav Ginsburg has a long piece on this in Soda Shem L'Reyav about different reasons why God created the world. And so on the lowest level, it's the idea, Ein Melech Belo Am. There's no king without a people. In other words, when I mean on the lowest level, it's not really like a value judgment. But here he arranged it according to Yud K Vav K. And so on the lowest level is, in a sense, I have to say, as if the essence of God, that is what we perceive as a melech, is dependent on there being a people to recognize it. Ein melech belo am. There's no king without a people. And so God wanted to manifest as a king, but there had to be a world that would recognize it. And then there's this idea that God wanted to give, And then there's an idea that God wanted to be known. And then the most enigmatic of all of them, which in a sense we might think would be the lowest level, but it's actually the highest level, is the phrase, it's in Midrash Tanchuma, Hitaveh HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyot lo dira b'tachtonim, that God had a desire, a passion to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. And someone once asked the Alter Rabbi, how do we understand even the language that God had a desire, God had a passion? What does that mean? What does that mean? And the Alter Rabbi said about this passion, there's nothing we can say. In other words, this is a tremendous mystery. Why exactly God wanted a dwelling place in the lower worlds. But the fact that we know this concept, it puts an infinite worth on not just the lights, but on the vessels themselves. And this is a huge fundamental philosophy of Judaism, is that there are different concepts in the world where this world is seen as it's an illusion. And we want to, in a sense, escape this world. We want to transcend this world. We want to go beyond everything that's holding us down in this world. And what it's translated is to be spiritual means to divorce yourself as much as possible from the material world that we live in. Now, there is something to this idea in Jewish thought. That's why sometimes, it's an expression in the Gemara that this world is called Olam de Shikra. It's a world of lies, which means that this world is illusionary in a certain sense, but more basic is that God put us in a material world in order to fix it, lift it up, to rectify it, to elevate it. And therefore, in a sense, this is one of the deepest meanings of the ladder in the prayer in the dream of Jacob, when he dreamt of a ladder that was entrenched in the earth and its head reached the heavens. So one of the ways to look at this is the more our ladder, meaning our perception of this world, our interaction in this world, the more our ladder reaches the heavens. And this is a bit paradoxical, but it's exactly what we believe, is that this world, we're not trying to escape this world. We're trying to fix it. We're trying to make it a better place. We're trying to elevate it, heal, spread light. And so this is a typical paradox in Judaism, because there is a place that we want to transcend. Sometimes in prayer and meditation, we want to transcend this world. But this is like the four that went into the Pardes. Arba shenichnasu lePardes, four great sages who really, after years and years of mystical meditation, so they entered into this mystical realm called the Pardes, the orchard. And we know that three of them did not come out the way they went in. One died. One became mentally imbalanced. One became a heretic. Only Rabbi Akiva went in peace and came out in peace. Because he knew that no matter how high I go, the goal is that it should be manifest in this world, in the vessels of this world. And so when the Maggid said Atsilut is here, it means that there is a way to put together light and vessel. And so, as we said, one of the main ways is through doing mitzvot, because again, most mitzvot have a physical manifestation to them, either speech or action, or an object, a physical object. So this is interesting because there's a famous disagreement between Rambam and the Ramban as to the nature of the world to come. The Rambam held that the world to come is purely spiritual. There is no materialism, no physicality to it whatsoever. And the Ramban disagreed and said that the world to come does have a physical manifestation to it. In the deepest level, they're not really arguing, because the Ramban would hold that the physicality of the world to come that he's talking about is so spiritual, it's like the world of Atsilu, where there's no more differentiation between physical and spiritual, between energy and matter, between light and vessel. So, two more points is that we've had this concept that we've developed in different ways called one becomes two in order to become one. We learned this last week. I'll go over just very, very quickly that God is one. He creates a dualistic world with the purpose of bringing everything back to oneness. Adam is created male and female, created as one being. They are separated. And then the purpose is to bring male and female together, the basar echad, one flesh. And then we learned the same thing about light and darkness. On the first day, light and darkness were intermingled. And then God separated between light and darkness. But at the end of the first day, it's Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, Yom Echad. That even when the light and the darkness are separated, on a deep level, they are still one. But now we can apply the same thing to light and vessel. That in the highest worlds, light and vessel are one. As we move down the ladder of the worlds, we move into more material worlds, lights and vessels become different, separated, sometimes even as opposites. But the whole purpose, again, is to bring them back together so that light and vessel will unify as one. So I think that's a good place to stop tonight, because the next section I would do, I wouldn't have enough time to get into it. So hopefully next week, we're going to go into manifestations of light, light and intellect, light and healing, light and speech, and hopefully if we have time, or we'll make another class, light and color. This is a very, very fascinating, all of these are fascinating. light in color. So we'll end with a bracha that our life should be full of light. That's a very simple bracha, but it's halavai, our souls, our minds, our hearts should be full with light.